good. Thank you. So yeah, I'm just making sure that we are also on the live feed. So there we go. I can see that now. Thank you. So hi everyone and welcome to DSL Design System London number 6 from this rather spectacular venue. So if you do get too distracted with the view, I won't blame you. I would highly encourage you to do what I now call a promenade of windows. Basically walk around and see the 360 view during the break later. For those of you who are online, you can possibly just see the background here. We have a spectacular view of London. We are on the 17th floor just by London Bridge, so you can just imagine. It's looking very great. So let's get going with today's event. Who am I here up speaking? For some of you that have been here before, you might recognize me. My name is Luis, and I am Head of Product Design at YLD, who is one of the organizers of these events. Who are DSL? Most of you probably know, that's why you're here in the first place, but just a quick reminder to everybody, we are a community and our aim is basically to gather different ideas and explore different minds and discuss challenging concepts around design system. We started out as Digital Product London, and then a couple of years ago we sort of made our focus being more towards design system. One thing that we are very excited about and very proud of is that we welcome speakers of all experiences. So for those of you who have been before, you have seen that we have first-time speakers, we have very seasoned speakers that have traveled the world on various conferences, and we are equally delighted to have either of them. For today's lineup, we actually do have at least one first-time speaker, so obviously we're going to give everybody the equal support because we are excited to have everybody. But you can just imagine if it is your first time standing up here talking to people, it can always be a little bit nerve-wracking. So, again, I want to give a massive shout-out and a welcome, and I also want to do a little bit of a raise of hands. Who has been to one of our events before in person? Oh yeah, see there, someone was quick there, but this is in person. That's a few. Okay, nice. Actually, I know that's true because I recognize some of your faces, so that's amazing. How many have been on the online events before in here? Yes, a few people as well. This is then me assuming that the rest of you are all first-timers to DSL. Lots of nods. We have the same question for the people online as well watching. We have people, oh, buongiorno. We have people from everywhere already. Fantastic. We got Italy. We have British people are very strict when it comes to punctuality. Well, Beltran, do you know what? I'm really proud to say that this is actually the first time we started bang on time. So I know, right? Thank you, thank you. Let's hope we keep it that way. We're going to do what we can to try to stick to our timings. So we have a new first-timers, as I said. We have a new people that have been here before, and we have some people. Do we have anyone who's been to one of our conferences back in 2019, before that massive thing that happened that we don't talk about? Oh, we do have some people from the conference time as well. Amazing. Okay, so obviously from DSL, I want to give a massive thank you to all of you that keep on supporting the community. So I'm going to get cracking, and I'm going to go through the agenda very quickly. Doors are already open. I've seen people mingle and drinking and eating, so I'm very happy about that. We kicked off the live stream. We have some people on there already, which is amazing. We are going to move over and, well, I guess I'm doing the welcomes and intros now, so we're already at that point. And let me see, 50. This is going well so far. We are going to hear a quick introduction and from our sponsors. So our sponsors today, YLD, which you can see over that table, and News UK, which is just everywhere around us. So this, as I said, amazing space. Then we're going to get started with our first talk by Mike and our second talk by Mitchell. I'll get into more details in a bit. We're going to have a quick break. That's going to be drinks and whatever food that's left. And then we're going to have our third talk by Riccardo, and then we're going to have a Q&A for the speakers together, all of us together. Which basically means that you can see up in the corner here we have a QR code. So if you have any questions for the speakers, we have a Slido link for you to put the questions in. And the one thing that we always ask, please put the name for who the question is for. And then we're going to have a wrap-up, and we do a quick mingle again. And then for those of you who want to continue the conversation, we have a space at the Sheaf. I think that's how it's pronounced, the Sheaf, yes, which is just a few minutes walk away from here. So, this evening's topics, to get into the bit more, how to speak to people and how a Nimble feedback process helps us understand our users. Probably for a lot of people, that's something which is really sound familiar, but it's going to be super interesting to understand how Mike and his team here at News UK are dealing with that. We're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into design systems and talk about the peace between devs and designers. Obviously, this is a continuous conversation, devs versus designers. Also, I like to think devs and designers together. This is why we have design systems. We're going to hear about Mitchell's input on that, who is one of our engineers at YLD. And last but not least, we're going to have a talk from Riccardo from Mews, who's going to talk to us about something that we all are very engaged in at the moment, accessibility, and particularly accessibility in design systems. So, as always, there's going to be a lot of learnings, and I'm sure lots of you are going to have lots of questions after you have all of those talks. Before we get started, this is my favorite part because I am a man of logistics. I love that. So some logistics, code of conduct, wherever you are online and you are commenting in the section, or whether you are here asking questions live. Yes, I said asking questions live, and some of you are already looking terrified. Don't worry, you can use the Slido deck, but for those of you who dare to ask your questions live, I encourage it. Just please make sure that you keep your language clean, be kind to each other, and don't share any inappropriate content, please, in the chat. For the live stream, you can join the conversation in chat. I can see that people are all ready, and I'm going to come back to that in a bit. But if you are thinking, oh my God, I can't comment, that's because you need to log in to your Google account. You don't need to sign up. If you just use your existing Google account, and then you can make comments. Social media is obviously extremely important because, as I always say, if we're not on social media, is it even happening? Do people even know that we exist? The answer is probably no. So, therefore, we encourage people to Twitter, DSLConf, and at YLD.io. We are also going to see the NewsKit Twitter, which I am trying to remember in my head now, which is at NewsKit. It will come up later, don't worry. So yeah, if you are on social media, please take photos, please share them, please use the hashtags that we got here. I know Design Systems in London is like the longest hashtag in the world, and how we're going to fit that in a tweet. I know, it's always the challenge, but I'm sure you can do it. Obviously, we also have LinkedIn, YouTube, and Meetup. And you think like, oh my God, there was so much. How am I going to remember all of that? Do you know what? You don't have to, because we have created one QR code to rule them all. And for anyone in the chat, there should be, for anyone online, there should be in the chat, these should appear as by magic. It's not magic, it's our fantastic team that are supporting us on back of house. So on this QR code, you can ask questions to the speakers. On the Slido, you can follow us, and you can see our sister community, React.js girls, but just happen to have an event tomorrow, just doing a quick plug there. And then you can see all the previous talks from the previous DSLs. If this is your first time and you're thinking, wow, the content is so great, I wish I had been to the previous ones. You don't have to wish. We can make that happen. Just join the YouTube one. And you can also check out the work that YLD is doing and the code. For those of you thinking, I want to see the GitHub, I want to see if these people really know how to code, you can do that too. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have, as promised, a word from our amazing sponsor, YLD, and our amazing sponsor, News UK. So I would like to start by welcoming Jessica from YLD. Here she is. I'm going to give her the stage for a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Oh, that's loud. Hi, everyone. I promise not to keep you too long. My name is Jessica. I am a client partner at YLD. And what that means is that every day I get to work with our amazing clients and teams. I'm just going to tell you a very quick bit about who we are and what we do, and then I'm going to leave you to go on with the rest of your evening. So YLD are a software engineering and product design company, and we work with a super diverse range of clients internationally. We work in industries such as fintech, we do some stuff with renewable energies, we've got some companies doing some cool Web3 stuff, some production media, basically just loads of really cool stuff. We work with our clients to help them to solve their problems and share our expert knowledge to help grow their knowledge. We can do all of this because we have amazing teams of people, and we work with our clients to create innovative solutions, and like I say, really share our expert knowledge so that when we leave the client, they're in a much better place than when we join them. So I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't give you a serious plug for the team at YLD. We are always looking for great permanent people. All our perm vacancies are online. We are also always looking for amazing contractors to partner with as well. We are on LinkedIn, we're online, and I think everything is on that QR code. So if you can get to the QR code, you'll be good. If you want to, of course, sorry, we're all here in our YLD t-shirts. I should point out the YLD t-shirts. So if you see anyone tonight, if you want to talk about anything that we do, anything, just anything YLD related, please do come and find us. In the meantime, have a lovely evening. I'm going to leave you all. Enjoy the talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. My bad, this should have been on in the background because obviously I needed to show off how amazing this looks. So take a moment to take this in now. Wow. So that's enough about YLD. Let's move over to our other fantastic sponsor, News UK. And we got Nick here. Come up, Nick.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I'm incredibly relieved to see so many people here. I had a sleepless night worrying that I was going to turn up because of the train strikes. This is actually the third time we've tried to put on this event, and we've finally done it. We've been scuppered numerous times by various things over the last year. But now that we've got you here, I have some very brief spiel to tell you about News UK. If you're not familiar with News UK, it's a media organisation. We have some of the biggest news brands and radio stations in the country. Our products reach around 40 million people every month. We're always looking to try new things and new ways to innovate, constantly exploring new technologies and platforms. And as a result, we quite often work with some of the biggest tech companies in the world on some really cutting-edge projects. The business is still transitioning from old media to new media, which is quite an interesting problem. We're growing new audiences all the time, and we're really shaping the future of news and entertainment. There's plenty of reasons to come and work at News UK, but my personal highlights. So firstly, having worked here a long time, I can say it's never a boring place to work. There's quite a good vibe here. There's always loads going on. The office is great, as you can see. I'm really glad that you've got to see it. Celebrity spotting in the canteen is always good fun. I saw Vanessa Feltz earlier. Great part of London, really good transport links, loads of pubs and restaurants, and although we all work hybrid, obviously, I do enjoy coming into the office when I come in. So there's also good practical reasons to come here. So we have good perks, there's great pension, there is private healthcare, gym membership, volunteering days, you get 4 volunteering days every year. And I appreciate I'm not a great advert for this, but we're also pretty hot on inclusivity. We have a very good diversity and inclusion team who've done some great work over the last 2 or 3 years. And we are now way above, I don't have the exact numbers, but way above the industry average for gender split and ethnic minority representation. And of course, there's the team. Put your hand up if you work at News UK. Thank you. Quite a lot of us here. We're in fact a now award-winning team. We are the Business Innovation Awards Team of the Year 2023. That's for you. Our team is made up of some really close-knit technologists. We have a really good time together. We socialise together, and I suggest go and speaking to the team if you're interested in working here and seeing what opportunities we have available. But that's not the only reason we wanted to host this event. It wasn't all about promoting News UK. We've been a really active part of the design systems scene for a long time. We want to continue to build and be part of this community. We've lent on a lot of you, I think, over the years while we've been building our design system, News Kit, and we will continue to do so. And my perception is that this is a particularly generous and open community, the design systems community. And I think that it's because of the work that we do. It's a very noble cause. We can see that there's a good way of working, and we're trying to push the industry in the right direction. So, as I say, we're very happy to have you here. Thank you for coming, genuinely. And thank you to YLD and also to the Floor 17 people for helping us host this event. and have some beer and pizza and enjoy the talks. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our both representations from our fantastic sponsors. Difficult to know which one you should apply to work for. They both seem incredibly amazing. It's going to give that one a think a little bit later, I think. Okay, so just checking in on the people online. So we have Canadian flag. I'm going to assume that they are in Canada because it makes it sound more exciting. They just didn't randomly put a Canadian flag. So welcome to anyone in Canada. I know for a fact that there are people from Portugal. Buenas noches. Don't want to make an assumption, but I'm going to take that as we have people from other places as well. It's always interesting to see. So one of the things obviously that happened during the pandemic is that we went live online and our community grew from being known just sort of around the London area, maybe even just around the digital roundabout as it's known. And now we have people from everywhere, and it's always exciting to see where people are coming in from. Okay, so it's time to get started with the talks. And the first talk, we would like to welcome, actually also from News UK, Mike Messina, who's going to talk to us about speak to people, how a Nimble feedback process helps us understand our users. Thank you. Come and take the stage. It's all yours.
Hello, everyone. All right. Give me a sec. Okay. Please work. Okay. Apologies. Talk amongst yourselves. Please do. Hang on. Nearly there, promise. Getting there. The screens are the other way around, you know. Okay. Thank you. That's very much appreciated. So yeah, like Nick said, welcome to News UK, and also hi to all the people watching online. I won't look in the camera again, I promise. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the feedback gathering journey we've been on at NewsKit, and how feedback is used to inform our decisions. And ultimately, how speaking to people has helped us to understand our users and improve the design system for everyone that uses it. Or design system therapy, as I affectionately call it from time to time. Frasier reference, if no one knows. So first things first, I'm Mike. I live in North Somerset, just south of Bristol. And I've been in the NewsKit design system team for coming up on 3 years now. My role includes producing specs for components, writing documentation that you can find on newskit.co.uk. Bit of a plug there. Customer support, and also speaking to people about their experiences of using the design system, which is handily what I'm here to speak about tonight. Or today, not tonight. I've written down today here, but it is obviously the evening, so I'll adjust. But first, a bit of background on NewsKit. I know that Nick already covered a bit of this, but I'll give you a bit of it's a different slide. Here you go. So NewsKit is an open source multi-brand design system. You can see some of the brands that are supported at the bottom over there. And it's created for brands across News Corp. So that includes teams from News UK and also Dow Jones in the US. There are approximately 60 themable and accessible components available, with more being adding to the system all the time. So the team here aims for high quality in everything we produce. So, sorry, quick bit of water. Offering the best possible experience for consumers in NewsKit. So to support that goal, we've adapted several methods to gather feedback from active users so that we can try and understand their specific needs and listen to their experiences. And this is so that we can look to improve the product we offer and the support that we provide to people. Here we go, nice survey. So we've got a user survey that we sent out quarterly, and this is sent out to individuals online via our Slack channels. And we do this to track user satisfaction, gauge confidence using NewsKit products, and share thoughts and ideas with the NewsKit team. The survey is kept anonymous, so the hope being that people feel more comfortable sharing their honest feedback with us. We try to keep the survey relatively short. That is all the questions sort of that we have, with the average completion time around 2 minutes. We highlight this on our messages out to people so they know what to expect. And we ask a range of questions designed to help us gain insight into how people view the design system, pitched back to them to help to improve NewsKit for everyone that uses it. Some of the examples we found interesting to hear in the survey were around the handoff of designs to engineers. Can sometimes be a bit of a challenge for some, so that was good for us to sort of know, and we can sort of work on that. And then in general, the support really is great across the board, which is also really nice, obviously, for us to hear. Good old NPS score here. So after a couple of times of sending out the survey, questions to gauge the net promoter score of the design system, and also which department and role that they have, we move those to the top of the survey, so that even if someone for some reason abandons it or goes away, we're at least capturing that key information so we kind of know what their sort of general satisfaction rating is, and also which sort of department they're sitting in. We also tried reducing the number of questions asked to keep the time to complete a bit shorter, and made some of the questions conditional, which has yielded a bit more of an increased completion of the surveys and the data as a result. So this rather fancy image, you probably can't read it, but so you can say anything that I want it to say. This image shows results of user responses when asked to choose 5 words to describe NewsKit, ranging from positive, maybe not so positive, to try and get a bit of a understanding of their sentiment towards the design system. So tracking sentiment over time allows the team to identify the problem areas that we can hopefully resolve, and the design system constantly improves and evolves based on this feedback. On average, we get around 10 to 15 surveys, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, from a range of NewsKit users. Well, all that sounds great. I'm done. I'll exit stage right, I guess. Obviously, the more people that complete surveys and fill, the better, as the data we get back is genuinely really valuable, and for understanding their user needs and the general perception of the system. However, surveys can sometimes be a bit more of a low priority for people to fill out due to just not having the time to do so, or maybe they just don't have anything to share in that particular format. So, over time, we found that people would occasionally start filling out a survey, abandon it, as I mentioned, which is nothing new when it comes to asking people to fill out forms, as I'm sure that many people in the audience can attest to. I know I let out an internal groan at times being asked to fill out yet another form. So we do try and encourage people to fill it out as much as possible and be in the drum, but obviously with the best intentions of the world, this doesn't always lead to more responses. Of course, there's more ad hoc feedback, that team members can receive directly in meetings or over Slack. I mentioned Slack before. And this can be super useful depending on what it is and who it's coming from. But if it is in a forum like Slack, then other people can also benefit from these responses as well. So more eyes on it. Hopefully they can track the resolutions and track updates. However, ad hoc feedback, like on the flip side, can get lost quite easily in, for example, a continuous Slack thread. So if something is also said in person that's obviously shared in good faith, the original meaning can get taken out of context from time to time, which can make the source of truth hard to ascertain. So it's wise to judge each case accordingly. We had some opportunities for improvements that we identified. We reached a point where we didn't feel like we were getting enough info from just the survey and ad hoc feedback. What we wanted to try was to gather information faster and a bit of a greater frequency. So we could better keep up with the rapid change of the business. As Nick has already mentioned, we've got many different teams and different brands that we support, and also their specific consumer needs that they need for NewsKit. So we wanted to find out more. Sorry, I don't know why I'm laughing at my own slides. We wanted to find out more about our user concerns and ideas that relate to NewsKit users by reaching out to them in a more direct and proactive way. Not just relying on consumers to reach out to us, but instead going to them directly with questions. And the key thing is listening to see if there's something ongoing that can be fed back to the team with more people that are in the loop, and so that actions can be taken and hopefully get things addressed in a bit of a quick manner. So this is a quote from Diana Mounter, who's head of design at GitHub. So she says, make time for in-person feedback sessions with internal stakeholders. It will expose you to insights that might otherwise never be uncovered. Something I wholeheartedly agree with. This sort of approach can help reveal unknown things that might only come up when having a more informal conversation with someone. So yeah, feedback on the NewsKit product is not, as I mentioned, not just encouraged, but actively sought. So we run regular, what we call consumer interviews, but I guess it doesn't really matter what you call them. These are sessions targeting consumers across all disciplines. Any concerns or criticisms can be raised, and feedback and ideas are encouraged. There you can see me waiting on a Google Meet call for someone to join. Consumer interviews are short and relatively low effort. They're just a meeting invite, essentially. And it's low effort for both parties as well, meaning that we can schedule as many of these as we need to, or less, depending on the needs of the business. And the format is a video call, mostly one-to-one. Sometimes we do group sessions with different teams as well, with an accompanying FigJam board, lasting around 10 to 15 minutes each per session. There's an effort to keep conversations casual, light, disarming. Given an intro at the beginning of each session, we sort of introduce ourselves, and anyone from the NewsKit team that also joins as well. And then obviously what we're asking for, what we're looking for from a participant. They're conducted online over a video call intentionally, so there's a bit of a distance for participants, and there's a bit more of a level playing field as well. So if someone wants to keep their camera off, like you can see here, that's absolutely fine. There's no pressure. And obviously, they've got a bit of a less of a pressure if they don't want to attend or they cancel for some reason, as you would be in person. We make a note of anything key in an interview. Sometimes if it's, say, just me, one-on-one, or there's more people on the team, we've got someone else to sort of take notes. But if there's a time when there's a particular detail or acronym, which I don't understand, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know all of them, it's important to capture these accurately. So being sure to be clear on and clarification on specifics mitigates the need to follow up later. Everyone is different, and they might be in a rush on a deadline, or like me, have a dog wanting to get on a call. These are, of course, the best meetings by far, and it makes me feel better about my dog, sometimes popping up on camera for a hug, as he thinks I'm talking to him in a nice voice. Obviously, I'm talking in a nice voice, so he thinks it's him. And there's a bit of an example there. I had to get that in there, sorry. If you're not an animal lover, I don't know what to do. So we make it a point at the outset to participants that it's a safe space for them to share honest feedback with the team, with no repercussions or anything like that. We're just simply looking for any thoughts that they have using the design system so we can improve what we offer to them. From components, documentation, support offered, everything sort of up for grabs. Feedback is triaged, and issues can be tracked, on an open roadmap, so consumers can see when they will be resolved. There's an example there. There's an example there of an Airtable, so you can sort of see the sort of thing I mean. The process helps to build strong relationships between teams, not just like me or someone else on the call, but the whole team as a whole, and ensures consumers know concerns are being heard, even if you can't do anything about it. All feedback can be useful. The challenge lies in spotting something worth expanding on and pulling a bit of a thread to try and get a clear picture. So great, have they resulted in, that's it, job done, great feedback? Yes, but it's an ongoing process that continues to be refined and adapted as the business and user needs change. I should have said up front, but I am by no means a user research specialist. I just enjoy talking to people and hearing what they have to say. These are some great resources that I recommend checking out, and they've been super useful for me as a guide on the subject. From the experience from NewsKit, however, there are some points that I have that might help point you in the right direction if you're considering starting your own consumer interviews or refining your process. So a single person being like me, or anyone else, single person being the feedback person is a bit of a danger. They may live the business, they may be busy, they may have to take on a role or what have you. So it's a good idea to have more than one person to gather and manage the feedback, and it makes sense to share the load across the team. Feel free to change up your methods, as much as you need to, and continue with what works for you. Something is always better than nothing. Don't worry if time doesn't allow you to do as much as you planned on. We often don't run sessions in like December or early January because who wants that? Who wants to speak to me in that sort of time? People are busy with other things. Focus on the key people or teams that your product or that use your product or service. Hopefully the people that you choose to speak are open. They come with a ream of notes. They're amazing. I love them. But it's also worth acknowledging this might not always be the case, and that's no one's fault. Just know when to cut an interview short if you don't feel like it's going anywhere. And this person may very well be grateful if they don't have much to say. Keep track of who said what. We use Airtable. Doesn't really matter what you use. But the important thing is to record all these notes so you can see everything in one place. It can be tracked, and if you want to follow up or track a certain issue, you can do so by cataloging that information. It sounds really obvious, but share key insights with other people. Don't just keep it to yourself. Otherwise, what's the use? From the surveys, interviews with your team, ad hoc feedback, and obviously the people that make the decisions at the end of the day. At the end of each quarter, there is a meeting where the team get together and we go through all of the feedback gathered so context can be provided and we can start to pick from that thread that I mentioned earlier. Demonstrate you listen to the users by not only by listening to them, but by showing them with actions and following up. Even if there isn't a tangible change, something which would be an example of something great would be a ticket in the backlog, something in a new release. You can point to it and say, this is because of you. Thank you very much. But that might not always be the case. It's just about listening to them and then presenting that back to the business. And show gratitude for people's time as well. And that it's valuable because it is. So to summarize, I'm doing all right on time, I think. Surveys or other methods for gathering feedback have their place for sure and can be just as or more valuable. It depends who you find out from and what you actually do. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, in my experience anyway, what you try. Just speaking to people and giving people a platform to do so is the important thing. Focusing on the active users of your design system, in my experience, was what will throw up the most useful insights for your team. And that's it. Thank you. Thank God I didn't fall off the stage.
I'll give you all this one. So I told everyone, all the speakers, please make sure that you're ready when someone comes off stage. And where am I? Mingling. But I'm here. So thank you so much. That was fantastic. So just as a quick reminder, if you have any questions for the speakers, please use the Slido deck. Obviously, this is not taking ages. So one thing I didn't say in the beginning that we always say normally is that please accept if there are some delays, some technical issues. This is what happens when you're live. And for those of you who are with us in an event, which we try not to talk about, you know that these tiny little hiccups we had so far are nothing. You should have been at that one. Now that's something that that's a hiccup. So, excellent. Thank you so much. Great talk. If you have any, as I said, questions, please use the QR code to get into that Slido. I've seen that there's some people on the live stream who are asking questions in the chat. Can I please ask you to move them into the Slido so we have them all in one place once the QA starts? Let's move on to our next speaker. This is Design System Deep Dive, Peace Between Devs and Designers. This is no one less than our own Mitchell from YLD. I am very proud to welcome him on stage. Thank you. The digital stage is all yours. I'm going to hang on to see if there's someone needs entertainment while this handover is happening. There you go. It's all yours. It's going to be so smooth this time.
Hopefully. Sorry, 1 second.
Ah, nice.
Okay, it's not going to work. Oh, there we go. Nope. Just do it from there. Yeah, good, thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So today I'm going to give you a nice deep dive into design systems, and I'll try to achieve peace between devs and designers, if that's possible. So my name is Mitchell. I'm a senior software engineer at YLD. So on the one hand, it'll be a bit biased towards engineers, so please forgive me for that. So let's start off by actually thinking about design systems on the side. So to begin with, we have 2 archetypes, and this is a very huge generalization. So don't take this to heart, don't be offended by it, but we're going to look at it from a perspective of a designer and developer. Those are the ones that are most going to use a design system. That's what we build a design system for. So we have, on the one hand, we have designers, and we can, generalize them to say that they're artistic, they're feeling, they're creating something out of nothing. They're creating something beautiful. The idea is your user's going to use it, and they're going to look at it, and they're going to understand it, and it's going to look nice. And that's actually quite hard to achieve. And you need a certain type of personality to achieve that, in my opinion. The other thing that they do is that they're actually testing the unknown. So a lot of times they'll have multiple different designs. They won't know which one's going to be the correct one. And so it's important for them to iterate and to try out all the different things that they've got going on in their mind. And only when they test it against somebody else do they actually perceive beauty. And then on the other hand, we have developers who are more logical, more structured. Now, that just comes from the job. When you're thinking of code, you're thinking of where pieces go, how to structure things so other people can use them. I'll step back a bit, maybe. And they're very pragmatic, so they're very much trying to achieve something in a short space of time with lots of deadlines. And I've prefaced the last bullet point here as lazy. So a lot of times developers are called lazy, and for valid reasons, which we'll go into. So are developers actually lazy? Not really. My experience, you're making hundreds of small decisions every day. So, the less decisions you make, the less mental fatigue you'll get. And developers, what they want more than anything is to just lead a nice, easy life. So the motto is, for most developers, is work smarter, not harder. Achieve efficiency very quickly. So automate what you can, focus on the bigger picture and do the cool stuff instead of having to decide on is this button the right corner radius or that. They care about more how things are structured. And again, they're very structured. So me, myself, and I'm sure other developers, we like to structure how things work because otherwise getting to a solution is almost impossible. And day to day, you're in the zone, you're coding, and breaking out that flow really, really hurts you, really reduces your productivity. So let's begin and actually try to achieve peace. So thinking about design systems is a philosophical question that we'll try to answer by the end of this talk. What makes a design system good? Individually great components, or the absence of components that cause pain? Now, I've worded that very specifically. You'll see why by the end of this. So why do we make design systems? Well, I'm going to say the real reason is for the developer. Controversial, I know. But the three key things that you want to do to achieve a nice developer experience and to make it really good for them is to reduce all friction, make it as smooth as possible. You don't have to reduce, you don't want to be wasting time, you don't want to be aggravated, you don't want to lose that focus as you're working. You want your work to look good as well, so you don't want it to look poor, and so a lot of developers are very perfectionist. So the less friction, the better you can get it. And obviously that also leads to bad relationships between dev and design. The more friction there is, the more that relationship will mellow, and that's not what you want. The second key thing is you want clarity. Understanding the why and how is actually very important for a developer. I think a lot of people miss that the developer wants the experience to be really good. They want to know why they're doing something. If they're just doing it for the sake of doing it, you should just get a machine to do it for you, which obviously a lot of people see developers as machines, but they're not. And you want to avoid repeating questions. There have been countless times where I've had to ask the same thing over and over again when a simple comment would have been enough to explain why or how something should look or feel. And less communication, again, if something's clear, you communicate less. You can dedicate your work more to the things that matter more to you. And the third key thing that I would say for a really great experience is having already made components, making it so you're not having to remake the same decision every single time, and you can make the designs really work for you. And if anything has to be custom, which inevitably you do end up having to make things custom, but you can make it so that only the things that are really hard are the things that have to be custom. A lot of times things can be very easy, so don't make it harder for the developer by having to reinvent the wheel every time. So what causes friction? So I mentioned a bit about it. We'll go a bit deeper into it. So a lot of times what you'll find is asking the same questions, and a lot of times if it means that a developer is asking you, how does something flow, it means that the end user is also going to struggle to understand, because your developer is the first person who will ever see your designs, who will ever actually work with the application. So if they're asking questions, it means it's not very clear, and that will help you get things done well in the long run. Inconsistencies. So one thing that's very frustrating for developers is seeing a button on one page, then seeing a button, maybe even on the same page, just slightly different. So the corner radius and the color's different, and you're asking yourself, why? And it happens. So the next thing that causes friction is not understanding. A lack of understanding of why and how, it goes a long way into making sure that the developer has a good experience. And having lots of small decisions, I mentioned before about hundreds of decisions a day, the more you can reduce that, the better it is. So what can we do? Well, I strongly advise a style guide. So a style guide is a way of documenting the how and why, the feel of the system. And you don't want it to be just a component library. That's not what you should want your style guide to be. You want it to be focusing on the why. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to make your user feel secure? Are you trying to make them feel safe, calm, depending on, obviously, the business case? And you want to make it very, very easily accessible. So that's a very important point. You should be able to search it. You should be able to find it very easily. So it should be something which you can go to immediately. And it should be a reference point which is updated constantly. So it's not something which should just be written and then forgotten about. And in the end, what it should really be is a contract between your designer and your developer. And I stress this very, very strongly. It should be less than 5 minutes to read. That's very important because I'll explain a bit later why. So, right, we want to create reusable components. And what you want to be doing is actually making sure that they're atomic. So that's what I recommend, making them atomic, reusable, and breaking them down to the very, very specifics. So this includes things like shadows, corner radiuses, gradients, animations. Make it so that they're reusable. It's a really nice experience for everybody. You have a new developer onboarding. They can immediately find what they need to find and use them straight away. And for both developers and designers, the ability to import the URL library into your project and use it with simplicity. What I mean by this is allow your tools to work for you. And to go on about reusable components, because they're very, very important, is I would recommend using atomic design. So that means literally breaking it down into small components and build up from the ground up. That means that your changes propagate and it's easy to use. If you're using React, I recommend using style components with style system. That enables you to achieve a lot of these goals very easily. And it puts the style choice directly on the components. Some libraries do it differently. Obviously, it's up to choice. That's a personal opinion of mine. And you want to be able to architect it in a way that the changes are easily documentable. You want to use semantic versioning. So that means, if you're breaking changes, communicate that. If somebody's using that library, they need to be sure that that's communicated. And a very important thing is to leave comments. That's both for designers and developers. So communication is absolutely key. So you want to be explaining your intents, attaching those links to your designs in the tickets that you create. That's super helpful. As a developer, you go onto a ticket, you can see it, and it's also very important to have those designs up to date. So you don't want the developer working off old designs, which has happened to me in the past. So it's very important. And so what it allows you to do is, if anything deviates from normality, you want to be able to leave comments so that it's obvious and you can see what's happening. That's when you get to a very custom stage. And this is quite important. If you're designing a design system, make sure you think of the edge cases. So this includes, if you're making a text box, think about overflow. If you're thinking about a picture, think about what happens if the URL is not available or it degrades for any reason. You want to make sure you think about what happens in those instances. And if you take away those decisions away from the developer, the better it is. And you want to be thinking about the happy path and the sad path. A lot of times people focus on one or the other and completely neglect the other side. So now, what's the real hero of a design system? It's the design experience. So 3 key things to make it an absolute smash. It's to be able to iterate really fast. So as a designer, you want to be making multiple designs. You might want to test things out. And you want to make sure your tools are working for you. You want to be communicating less. You can focus more on your work. It's kind of the same thing for a developer. You want to be focusing more on your work, doing the cool stuff. And number 3 is you want to be using tools that you love. In the past, it used to be where your tools would really work against you, and it'd be really hard to get designs up, and it would take time. You'd have to make one, and then you have to make another one, and sometimes you'd have to start from scratch. Now, if you use reusable components, you can make it so you can really iterate fast and change things and test them, which will inevitably help your user. So again, one way of doing this is by building a component library, and you want to break it down to the very fundamentals, I would say, and you want to make it in a way that you can communicate it to developers nice and easy. Make sure it's a common language. It's so nice when a designer says to you, oh, can you make that a large text? And you know exactly, you change it on the system, and it's large, and it's exactly as they intended it to be. The pixel size is exactly as you intended it and as they intended it. So you want to make sure that common language is there. And being able to reuse it, again, it's a no-brainer. You want to be able to use it across all your designs, and it will reduce the decision-making on your part as well. And so for the style guide, this is from the designer's point of view. You want to make sure your intention is clear. You want to think of it as how would a developer look through it and think. So you need to actually think in their shoes, which is quite hard. You're going to have to think logically. You're going to have to structure it in a way which might not be how you would expect to think, because the developer thinks in a different way. So it's important to collaborate with a developer when creating a style guide. And you want to keep it short. You want to use less words, and you can be visual, and visual actually really helps because the intent comes across very much clearer. So at the end of all this, my goal here was to tell you what can you actually do, what can you take home, and how can you make things better for your own work environment. So things to collaborate on. You start off with, so if you have one or a design system already, obviously it's quite irrelevant, but it would help you as well. You should create a style guide. The designer creates it. So they're the ones that have the intent and the feel, and they'll know how they want things to present. And then the developer has a look at it and actually confirms it's usable. You want to make sure that both are happy with it. And then this is something I really like to do. On the first day of the job, it's the first thing that you hand to a designer and developer. Both of them can get on the same page, and they will remember it because it will be one of the first things that they get taught of how to use the design system. And you want to make sure that the components are atomic. I recommend Figma components and Storybook components. I recently learned about this tool on Figma, and you could essentially export the theme and make it a single source of truth. That's a really nice idea. And you want to make it so it's collaborative and you can easily access it. You want to be setting up a communication layer. So that includes, if you're using Slack or any kind of internal messaging system, have two channels. One channel is for updates on the design system. Only that. You don't want it polluted with anything else, no questions, nothing. On the other one, that's where you ask your questions, that's where you discuss things, that's where people can look and see what's coming up. And obviously this is harder to implement, but it's very useful, is to have change logs. So both for designers and developers to see what's being changed and to version it so you can actually figure out why is it not working, why isn't it looking the way I expect it to look. Now for developers. So again, align the design tools with your base foundation. So create the component libraries and then check to make sure that they actually match. So again, if you have this single source of truth, that'd be amazing. But if you don't, go and check, make sure you're aligned, and make sure that it's exactly as you expect it to be. Use semantic versioning. Again, that's very helpful as you iterate, as things change. It's useful to be able to look back in history and see why things have changed and see it very clearly. And this is very specific. If you're working with micro front ends, package it up. Have it as its own micro front end and make sure that people can use it and have access to it in a way that is very much versioned and easy to use. There, in that kind of environment, it's very important to have a good communication. And now for designers, what can you do? Again, attach your links in tickets, because otherwise you'll have the developer looking throughout all your designs and they might pick the wrong design. That has happened in the past. You don't want that. I would strongly recommend attending planning meetings. That's a very good point for developers to ask questions and actually gauge what your intention and your reasoning behind these designs was for. And you want to make sure that your tools work for you. As I said before, make sure those changes propagate throughout all the designs, and then you can easily see it, and it's nice. And so the final point that I made was, what makes the design system good? Is it individually great components, or the absence of components that cause pain? Well, my opinion, and I think hopefully you all agree, it's of the absence of components that cause pain. The amount of times that you'll use a component and it causes pain is very high. So the more you reduce that, the better experience for everybody. So what you really want to be doing is having good collaboration, good communication, and a good foundation of reusable components. That's what makes a good design system. And hopefully with that, we can achieve peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Excellent. I always love when someone kind of brings something that other people think like, oh, controversial opinions. I say that because we had some, I plugged in the wrong thing. Now we got two things, and I don't know where I'm plugging in. We had some comment in the chat, and I love that. Immediately somebody disagreed, and there is nothing more good for a community than some disagreement, friendly disagreement, obviously. So I would encourage anyone that on the live feed to please respond to that comment. I'll have to disagree there. Design is about functionality, not beauty, often. If not always, pretty strategic. What do you all think? So have a think about that. And then for the chat, go on. There we go. Someone is already talking about that. I can barely hear me. Please speak up. I feel like I'm shouting. Can you guys hear me? Can we get some, how are we doing on the live feed? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Don't worry, Sebastian, you didn't miss much. It was just me rambling. So we are going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back with a third talk, Accessibility in Design, with Riccardo, who is eagerly waiting. But hold off, Riccardo. These guys, they want to drink. And who am I to stop them from that? So for the people on the live feed, we will be back in about 15 minutes. Yes? So please help yourself to drinks and pizza, and we'll be back here. Please make sure you're seated within 15 minutes, yeah? Or organized fun. I told you I'm a man of logistics. Thank you. Hello everyone on the live feed. So we are about to come back and sit down. We just, as you can see here, it's quite busy and we're just trying to get everybody to sit down. And once we've done that, we're going to be back with our third speaker. Thank you so much for hanging on. See you all up there on stage in about a minute or two. Thank you. Interesting talks, an amazing view. What more could one ask for? Not a lot. So back to Beltran. He has spent the last 15 minutes eating broccoli, apparently. And I really appreciate that Beltran has shared that with the rest of us because, that's a fun fact. The community is supporting Beltran and his broccoli eating. We have some really nice, some comments here from Sebastian as well. Now we can hear speakers loudly and clear, and hopefully you can hear me as well now. Okay, so that's it, everybody. We are back, and as I said before, we have the super keen Riccardo is going to join us on stage. The digital stage is all yours. Accessibility in design systems, easy wins and lessons learned.
Hi everyone, give me a second to set up everything. Do I get the screen to change? Oh, thank you. Let me present. Cool. Okay, let's start. This talk is about accessibility in design system and easy wins and lessons learned. This is table content. You can see kind of like the topics we're going to cover. If you check the QR code, you can access the slides. They're on my GitHub if you want to check them right now in the live stream or later. Let's start. As I said, hi everyone. My name is Riccardo Erra. I'm a senior front-end engineer from Rome, Italy. I've been living in London for the last 13 or 14 years. I've been working on and around design system for quite a long time. I used to work for Acne Council and I started like a pattern library there. My previous role was at Bulb, the energy company. I used to maintain the design system with some other front-end engineers. Currently, I work at Mews. Mews is a management system for hotels and properties as well as their guests. The company started in 2012. It's based in Prague. We just had a Series C investment last month. Quite big company. There's like 650 employees more or less, and 180 are in the kind of like technical department. So before actually talking about the easy wins and the lesson learned, I want to give you like a very quick introduction about accessibility, or usually shortened as a 11Y or LI. So I really like this. This is a quote. Everything that's not like my kind of like thinking, it's referenced at the end in the resources. So I'm not stealing stuff from other people. So I'm reading this. Accessibility is the practice of making your website usable by as many people as possible. And I picked this quote because I like how inclusive it is. It's not talking about disability or any sort of like impediment or stuff like that. It just talks about like people. So talks about like all of us. We're all people. There's not just like us and them. It's quite inclusive. I think it's quite important to use the right language when we're talking about accessibility. Something else about accessibility, it's quite important to keep in mind, is that we think that the people that have accessibility needs are very like a small percentage of the kind of like the people in general, but it actually is not the case. As you can see from this slide, 1 billion people currently experience some form of disability. We are like what, 7-8 billion in the world, so you can do the percentage yourself. And the reason why it's, if you check like this illustration on the right, this is actually coming from Microsoft. It shows like quite well how we should reframe the concept of accessibility and people that have accessibility needs. It's not just like permanent accessibility needs, but also like temporary, situational. Each of us in any moment we can be in a situation where for some reason let's say we are, there's the one on the top right. Let's say we're holding a baby and we're using our computer. We cannot use the mouse. We cannot use the keyboard. They can create a situation where, let's say, if the website you're accessing doesn't work with the keyboard navigation, at the moment you can access the website and the service. Also, I guess if you don't care about people and you care about money, there's also like a good start. Businesses lose approximately £2 billion every month by ignoring the needs of disabled people. So I guess you can use this slide with your boss if he doesn't care about people. I don't know, up to you. Let's talk about like the easy wins first. And I guess a bit of backstory. So I joined Mews in 2021, and last year the team was like, we have actually a proper design system team, is like up to 10 people now. Last year we were like kind of like less people, 2 or 3 of us. So at some point we were without a designer for a few months, and we decided to kind of spend our time improving the components that we already had. And we decided to tackle accessibility, and we realized quite quickly that our components were not very accessible at all. And that's why like we spent 6 months just trying to fix as many components as possible and as much as possible. And those are kind of like the easy wins, meaning like the things that we managed to fix and improve with not much effort, and we gain quite a lot in terms of accessibility. First of all, like why accessibility in the design system is quite like important. Again, I'm going to read this quote. Design system present a unique opportunity to build accessibility and inclusion into your component library from the get-go. If you think about it, like when you build like a button and then has to be rebuilt every time, like from scratch, you have to hope that developer who's building that button at the moment actually knows and time and cares like about accessibility. But then if your button comes from your design system and was made accessible in the first place, every time the component gets reused and consumed by the other developers in your products, it will stay accessible all the time. And this is why we should focus on accessibility a lot in our design system in order to then spread this accessibility in all our products and platform where the components are consumed. The first easy win that we kind of like faced and like we decided like to go for was like to start with colors. Colors are a massive part of the design system. Even when you have a very like basic design system, usually the colors are always there. Sometimes they're kind of like the first thing that you do. And you can just start with the colors. You can use like, I put the screenshot here on the right. This is the WebAIM color contrast checker. You can just, compare manually the foreground and the background colors on all the different situations that you have, all the different buttons and elements and backgrounds. And you can gather from the score, from the ratio, if actually it's good enough or not, and if you're in a situation where your colors are not accessible. Or, you can go more complicated. Like, this is something taken from Stripe. They build this very, very complex, like, color palette automated tool that's based on the color spaces. It's quite mind-blowing. Like, automatically can pick the right colors and the right shade and palette for you. Either is good, like, I guess start with a simple one, and if you realize you have a lot of colors and it's more complicated and you want to build something that's maintainable, then build like a tool for yourself. Another easy win, and something that I think we're aware of, but we kind of like forget, especially in this day and age, that we have all this like very great, but kind of like overcomplicated sometimes, like JavaScript framework. It's that you should try to use semantic code and build your components in the most semantic way as possible. This is because like the web was built in a way with HTML, and the browsers like know how to kind of like interpret the HTML element, how to make them accessible, how to work with them. So if you end up using the right components, the right like HTML element at the right time, you end up already with a lot of accessibility out of the box. And obviously you can achieve the same, not using semantic code, but it's all like extra work. And I guess you're building something less robust at the end. And obviously, sometimes it's not possible to use semantic HTML, and that's correct, that's right. Just like try to use semantic HTML as much as possible. I kind of like made this very, very simple example, just I guess to show the point. Like, on top we have like a button written without using like semantic code, and at the bottom is the same element just using semantic code. And as you can see, like, first we're using less code, as you can see from the bottom example, and also like we don't have to think about all the different stuff that we had to add like manually if, for example, using like a div element instead of a bottom element. Something else that we kind of like was easy in a way for us to understand what we have to do and achieve like a better accessibility in general was to start to test with keyboard and ensure that all your content is accessible by keyboard alone. This is something like, anyone can do. Throw your mouse away, just try to use your keyboard. Try to navigate throughout your component. Try to use every single bits in your component. Like, try to see if you can enter, I don't know, an input label. You can click on a button and so on and so forth. Like, this will actually help you to understand the kind of like average accessibility of your component. And going back to the point I was making before, if you have semantic components and using semantic code, probably the keyboard navigation is going to work way better than if you end up like with something that is not semantic. The last kind of like easy win for us was like to try to use screen readers and try to actually use our components just with screen readers. And then like, again, like this quote, I quite like it, again, inclusive language. Screen readers enable the independent use of digital devices by those who otherwise would not be able. Again, he's talking about like, every kind of people in every type of moment. Sometimes we think about screen readers mainly for users that are like visually impaired, but it's not just the case. A lot of people just prefer to use screen readers for certain scenarios and for certain products. That could be probably out of the kind of like 4 easy wins, the more time-consuming one in a way. If you're not familiar with screen readers, there's multiple of them. They work for different like operative systems. It's not sometimes that simple to understand what you have to do and how to use them. Like, probably will take a bit of time, but again, you can gain quite a lot in terms of accessibility for your component. I spoke about easy wins, and also, it's the title of my talk, also about like lesson learned. And what I mean with that, think about, you have a coin, is always like two sides. I guess there's the lucky side and I guess maybe the unlucky sides. So with lesson learned, I want to cover the kind of like stuff that we understood maybe a bit too late while we were really like working on this long process, and kind of like we wish we kind of like knew sooner, and to make our life easier and to avoid maybe being slowed down, or maybe like being sure that everything was accessible, and then you test your components and you realize you're not actually there yet. I want to start from this one that's about learning about standards, guidelines, and requirements. When we started with just like doing the easy wins I show you, test the colors, keyboard navigation, screen readers, use semantic code, but we were not aware about the different like standards and what actually are the requirements for those standards and the guidelines that can actually help you to understand. So, For example, this is a very useful tool. This is a screenshot from the gov.uk website where there's a page that actually explains to you how to understand the WCAG guidelines. So WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and we at Mews actually were aiming for the 2.1 WCAG standard, so that's kind of like the most used at the moment. So this page will help you to kind of going through all the different guidelines that are there. If you can read the document, but it's quite long and not very fun to read, to be honest. Another tool that can help you, it's you have to understand that we didn't know at the beginning, what are the requirements for being sure that actually you are achieving this level. And there are tools like this one. This is built by IBM Accessibility. IBM, they have a great design system called Carbon. It's a very, very good one. And also they have this kind of it's like a tool that helps you to understand your requirements. As you can see from the screenshot, maybe it's small enough, maybe. So you can pick the kind of technology that you have and the standards that you're going to and the level, and then you have these kind of checkboxes, and you can see actually what kind of things you should test against. And this example says, you have 34 things, that you have to check. This can help you quite a lot while you're testing. You don't have just to do the classic things that we did, the color and the other stuff, but actually you know exactly what you check. Maybe you have to check the text zoom, low contrast ratio, and other stuff that you might not think about it. Maybe, audio, if you're let's say your website has some audio, you have to test against that, all this kind of stuff that maybe don't come to your mind in the first place, but they're quite important and you will need them to achieve the standard. Something else that we wish we learned sooner was to never stop improving your testing skills. We knew how to test with keyboard, screen readers, and other stuff, but then there were so many things that we would do manually, and we have to remember to test this kind of stuff that we kind of not try to use tools because we're thinking the tools were not being help us, but actually they do quite a lot. This one is the one that we use quite a lot. This from Axie DevTools by Deck. This specifically can work as a browser extension, and you can just check in any page, it tells you the score and tells you what are the issues and what stuff you should focus on. There's others. This is from Microsoft. It's called Accessibility Insights. We use this at Mews for actually testing all our components. We find it very good. This work as an app on web and mobile and on different OSs, Mac OS and Windows. Also as a browser extension. We use it as a browser extension and give you a list of checkboxes you can check against manually, but also can do some automated quick testing that can help you to gather more or less the situation of your component and of your page. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to talk more about code and tech stack and stuff like that. Those are the kind of tools that we use and use for our design system. So maybe using something else, so maybe using different tech stacks. So your mileage may vary in terms of how useful these things are, but it's only 3 slides, so I think it's okay. And it's mainly code and stuff, but I'll try to explain as much as possible. This something was very, very incredibly important for us to take advantage of the available tools. There's, you're not reinventing the wheel, you're trying to build something that is accessible and is robust and resilient, and there are tools out there that can help you to avoid mistakes in the first place and also to repeat mistakes once you change some code and stuff. For example, this is a screenshot from a very, very cool ESLint tool that is called Doctorlink Accessibility, and this tool actually you can have inside your IDE. This screenshot is in VS Code, and it shows you when you're writing some code, what are the accessibility issue in the specific component. So, they can help you quite a lot to try to avoid to build something that's kind of broken from the beginning. You can even configure this tool in a way that you're not allowed to push any new code unless this actually is kind of not correct, and is very, very useful. Another tool we use Storybook for kind of showing our components, and Storybook has a bunch of add-ons. One of the coolest one is there's an accessibility one that you can just add simply, and it just lives there in your Storybook. And for each component can actually show you what are the accessibility issues that component has. And it works pretty well. You can even if there's multiple ones, there's a checkbox next to each of them, and you can select which one you want to check, and it's going to highlight the part of the component that actually is breaking the accessibility. Let's say your component is massive and it says like, oh, color contrast is not good enough, like where, like which bit of that component. So this is pretty good, and since we started to use this component, all components that were done, sorry, these add-on, all components that were done back in the days, like was so easy to spot them, which ones that were still not accessible. And the kind of like another one that's about code, it's, I really like use the force, like provide the right data or you'll get yelled at by your computer. There's, you know, we and Mews, our components are built with React and TypeScript, and there's a way you can kind of like avoid that other people that are consuming your components end up doing something wrong or forget something. Because, you know, when you have a design system, you have two sets of users, like the users, they use actually the product of the company that you work for, but also you have the other developers who are the people that consume your components and then build like application using your components. Those also are your users. And you have to build also like a DX, like developer experience for them to, in order to be able to use their components in a good way, but also like be able to not make mistakes. So you can do something like, you know, React, you can add prop types to React, and what it does kind of like enforces some properties to be added to each component. For example, this is an image, and you know, the alt tag, it's quite important for accessibility, that becomes like mandatory, is required. If the developer forgets to add it, then the component will throw some error and you cannot go on and you cannot commit your code. Or, you know, we use TypeScript. There's another example. You have some props, you have an interface, and the alt tag, again, it's required. It means it has to be passed in order for the component actually to be valid and not actually have some error in your IDE. One of the last one, that's something like, he kind of like shocked me in a way, because maybe I was being a bit naive, like having accessible component or components, think about like a bunch of components all together combined in a page, is not the same as having an accessible page, because, you know, you might test your components in isolation, they work amazingly well, but then when you combine together in a page, maybe, you know, you can navigate through one component, but somehow you cannot exit the component, you cannot navigate using the keyboard through the second component, all this kind of stuff. Or maybe like one component, when you zoom in, is hiding the one below or above. Like those things are very, very important. So once we've done testing our components, what we did, we actually check all the pages where our components were used, and we tested them individually, all together, and we found out something that we didn't find out while we were testing the components in isolation. And the last kind of like lesson learned, this is something I guess we still have to learn in Mews because we haven't done this yet. It's don't forget to commission a proper professional audit. What I mean with this, like you can test as much as you want internally, everything, spend hours, days, weeks, months, but you are always like try to test your components without probably the skill and the knowledge or how a person with a disability was going to use like your product. So I have a professional audit, people that actually know how those tools, the screen reader or the keyboard navigation, it's used by actually the people in need and the people that will use your product in that way. Almost to the end, I think I'm just on time. So I want to like close with kind of like a couple of things. The first is the work is never done, but a bit of effort is better than no effort at all. What do I mean with this? Like, can be intimidating to find out that your components are, I don't know, 10% accessible, and you think, oh God, I don't have the time or the knowledge to actually get to 100. Like, don't think about that. It's kind of like a, you know, half empty, half full glass situation. Like, let's say you spend 2 weeks and you increase your components from 10% to 20% in terms of accessibility. You're still far from 100, but you doubled the accessibility of your component. Like, think about like the small wins and kind of like drive those like wins to actually push you forward. And it's an effort that will continue forever. Don't think about that you will never achieve 100. Like, it's all about the small steps, because like, you know, your most powerful weapon is empathy. It's, you might not know how to do something, you might have to study, have to learn, you might find frustrating to use a screen reader, for example, but empathy is the most important thing that there is, like, to actually to increase the accessibility of your component and to be sure that, like, you know, everyone using your component and the products that get built with the components actually they have a better experience. And I really hope that, you know, after this talk, maybe you will go into your design system and maybe you will try to fix maybe, you know, stuff here and there just to make a small, you know, a small change that actually will make like a big impact for a lot of people. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. By the way, we are, last thing, I should have been this before. We are hiring a Mews in my team. So if you're looking for a job, we're looking for a senior product manager. The QR code actually sends you to the application if you're interested. And yeah, thank you so much. The resources are at the end if you want to check. Everything that I quoted is there. Thank you.
We can share the slides, yeah? We can share the slides.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. So a lot of good resources there, and you're thinking, I didn't even have time to take a photo of that. Don't worry, we're going to share all the slides afterwards. We got, pretend that you can't see them, but magic is happening and we're setting up for the Q&A that we're now coming to. In the meantime, thank you so much. Fabulous. How did that happen? Wow, magic. Oh, great. In the meantime, just a reminder of our fantastic QR code. So this is the one for anyone who has questions, whether you are online or whether you're in the room. If you are in the room, I will still throw that challenge out to any one of you who is brave enough to ask the question in person. I always do this, and we rarely get anybody. So today, let's see how you're all performing. Before, let me see, we got them all ready. They are ready. You guys are ready? Am I ready? I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Please, if you wouldn't mind, join me on the stage. I'll be back in 1 second. This is when I forgot my iPad. So, let me see here if I can do this. I can't see anything because I'm nowhere. Hello? No? Change of scenery. No? You guys should all be mic'd up. Is that true? Yeah. Nobody can hear me. Oh, here we go. Hello. Oh, here I am. Here I am to everybody. Okay, so we have come to the part of the evening where we do the Q&A. We have a lot of questions actually in the Slido, but please, that doesn't mean that you can't keep them coming. I would also say to anybody on the live stream, I know that some of you have put some questions in the chat. If you haven't moved them over to the Slido, they might not make it to the Q&A. Just a little cute information for you there. Let's see if I can zoom this so I can actually read it. Oh yes, great. Okay, how are you guys feeling after that? You all feeling good?
Good.
Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. So let's get started. I'm going to jump straight in there. This is clearly a question for NewsKit. How big is the NewsKit team, and what's the makeup of the team?
Oh, yeah. I was looking for your microphone, but obviously I don't need it. So yeah, we've obviously got everyone pretty much here, most people. I think we've got around, looking at my boss.
Better not get it wrong.
Yeah, we got 5 designers. We got more engineers than that as well, and obviously product people. So yeah, fairly big team actually.
Fantastic. And I also know for a fact that you have a product manager or product owner for the design.
Yes.
Design system?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
I say that because for some people that might sound obvious, but for a lot of people that is very, very much not obvious. And so if you're like me, when I first heard that, I did cast some jealous eyes over thinking, wow, that's a team that have their own product owner for the design system. So yeah, excellent. That's awesome. So that's a little bit about that setup. This is another one again. So you guys, I believe that you guys are recruiting design system advocates at NewsKit. Is that true? Or is that just a rumor?
No, not just a rumor. No, we look for people in designers in different product teams.
Yeah.
So they are sort of like the champions, as it were, in those individual teams. They work with our team directly, and we support them, but they're sort of like the, say, gatekeepers almost.
So how do they support you guys with bringing the design system forward?
So we do have a community library we're looking to roll out. So the idea is that we have a bit of an open sort of forum where people can add components and stuff like that, and maybe we can end up bringing them back into the system. So bringing that knowledge back.
Excellent, brilliant. So this one, I guess, is a little bit for you, but I think this is actually a very interesting question for everybody. So the research, the stuff that gets done, how do you share the insights just for the team? Would you also share it to senior stakeholders, the things that you sort of find out through that research? How is that shared? Do you want to start with it, or?
Yeah, I can start.
Go for it.
Yeah. So like I said before in my talk, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with other people. Obviously, there are certain people within the team that have more insight and they have more context as well. And obviously, different people make different decisions. So yeah, it is important, obviously, to share that with senior leadership as well.
Excellent. And Riccardo, do you have?
Yeah, we started for a bit to also do a bit of survey internally for the front-end people in my company that are actually consuming the components. That was not very successful. There was not many of them. So we started to do office hours right now. So every couple of weeks, we actually, everyone in the team show up in the call and everyone can just ask questions. And we share for example, also our review notes, what we worked on. So we try to not stay isolated as a team. So we are there for them to help and also to receive criticism, because then we actually say in the meeting is not for us to show off about what we do, but it's for them to come.
I mean, it's a little bit like that.
Yeah, but,
of course.
Yeah, but it's also for them to come and say, okay, this component is confusing. Why? Can we change this component? I want this, I want that. It's kind of a way to. They see us as kind of we want to help them. We're not just dictating stuff to them. I think that's quite important. It's been quite successful since we started that.
Amazing. So I think that's sort of almost a bridge to a question which is actually directed at you here, Mitchell, which is about the communication between designers and engineers. Mm-hmm. So even if it's not necessarily about feedback, it's sort of a handover process. You talked about it, but what are some key things to ensure that handover is smooth?
For communication, having the right line of contact with the designer of the design that you're working on, ensuring the Slack channels are updated, people are communicating, and just ensuring the documents are correct. I mean, a lot of times if they're not correct, that's when communication dialogue opens. And obviously, what I was saying in my talk was to reduce that communication layer, reduce the amount that you have to go backwards and forwards and discuss things. So if you make it in a way which allows people to communicate easily, you'll find that you'll have less communication overall. Excellent.
Do you guys have any input on how do you make that communication between the various teams?
So I can say from more as a designer, obviously, going out there and sort of meeting an engineer a bit more, with the handoff that you do, and Figma's made that a lot easier as well. I've seen from a guy from Figma over there, probably happy to hear that. But yeah, by sort of bridging that gap a little bit more and, meeting someone more than halfway, I think is important.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think what Mitch said, having, I mentioned office hours, but also we have a Slack channel that's just for people to ask things and kind of and we always have someone, not on call, but there's always someone potentially ready to jump in and help from the design point of view and from the developer point of view, because sometimes we have designers, they don't understand the decision that were made before they joined, and sometimes we have developers who don't understand how a component should work once they try to consume it.
Yeah, makes total sense. I think I saw a tweet from somebody who may or may not be in this audience today that said one of the issues could be that designers and engineers don't always understand what the other person is capable of doing. And if I have misquoted that tweet, I'm not looking at anybody, so apologies, but I thought that sort of goes in line with that. So you mentioned, Mitchell, about style guides and reading, and obviously this is part of documentation and making sure that communication is working. But how can we actually encourage or enthuse engineers to read and follow the style guides?
Well, what I said was actually really important. If you make it less than 5-minute read, I can assure you that the developer will use it, because I've seen style guides where it's 20 pages long. I don't have the time to do that, I'm sorry. But if it's 5 pages, I can read through it very quickly. It's, that's usable, and people will use it and will remember it and will go back to it.
Excellent. So I also know that documentation is one of those things that actually in our last in our last DSL, we sort of had whether documentation is a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, and there are many different opinions on that, and they started a bit of a Twitter conversation, and I am living for that. So there is some really good content out there on how to do good documentation, and for anyone who's super interested in it, come and see me, and I can guide you directly to someone who is fantastic when it comes to documentation. If you've been to DSL before, you know me, I always plug things left, right, and center, so if there is a resource, I'll make sure you're aware of it. So I'm moving over a little bit to accessibility that you were talking about. So you mentioned that the approach. So from a cost perspective, I guess this is not necessarily an actual figure, but how much do these accessibility approaches add to the project, just to understand if it's a cost or if it's a lack of knowledge, which may be why some people are not focusing on it?
I think it's important to change the mindset about working on accessibility. If you think about the cost, it's probably kind of already too late. Accessibility ideally should be baked in and should be having something accessible is not about just code, it's about design, it's about content, it's about the company as a whole and the product as a whole. So if you think about that from the beginning, probably the cost is not that massive, just because first it's spread in different team and it's spread towards the time and becomes part of the normal routine. If you have a website and you're building a website, no one says, oh, what's the cost of keeping the website up? The website will stay up, that's your product. And if we change our mindset about that, I think we will think in a different way. And obviously, think about the other side. There might be costs that you will incur if your product is not accessible, and let's say you're on the US market where actually it's a legal requirement, and then you can get a massive fine to pay. So maybe think about that. So I think the cost that will cost you if your product is not accessible. So reframe your concept in a way.
And potentially a false economy to think that it's a cost that they can't bear. Yeah. Have you guys sort of had any issues with trying to get accessibility? I mean, obviously, you fairly mature system. How is that working for you guys?
So we do have accessibility best practice baked into our products, which obviously then different consumers can use. But yeah, it's absolutely right. It should be seen as not what's the cost. It's it should be for everyone, right? And overall, that will benefit everyone, not only using the system, but the end user, which is the most important thing. So.
Yeah, and I guess in a way, when you start a new project or you're at the early stages, then you should definitely include accessibility as part of anything that you sort of have as your basis. But you could potentially run into problems for a product that already exists or a website that isn't currently today, but they sort of need to make that change. How you mentioned about, we talked about the false economy and the things that can happen if they don't do it, but how do you support teams who sort of still don't really understand the importance?
I think if we're talking about the design system, the fact that you can achieve so much just working on the components that you control in a way can actually remove the stress from other teams to actually, oh, I'm using this component, do I have to do any work to make it accessible? If actually you present it already with accessibility baked in, and you explain also talking about documentation, in your documentation maybe you explain why it was built in a certain way and the accessible reason behind it, you kind of you give less work for the other developers while at the same time you educate them, and then accessibility is something that will stay in their mind probably for a long time and for the best.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump, this is what was happening in the Q&A, we jump from one topic to another because that's how the questions are seen, and we love that. So all of you, you spoke about tools that you're using. Are there any specific tools that you would recommend for creating style guides and component libraries? Figma is always mentioned. There are other tools potentially. So have you guys got experience of other tools that you would recommend?
Okay, I'll start off. For example, Zero Heights. I've heard that's very good. You're also more than free to just make simple web pages. Again, Jira, just using Confluence pages. It really depends how in-depth you want to do it and how much effort you want to put into it.
Yeah, I would say we at Mews, we use Figma and we use Zero Height. We quite like it. And then as I was saying during my talk, like we use Storybook for actually like presenting the components for the other developers, and all those tools, like they work like quite well, like within each other. Like they will like kind of like do something that the other one doesn't. So it's quite like a nice flow. To like, you know, Figma's for designers, Storybook is for the developers, let's say, and then the documentation, it's something in between that is for all. For example, in our documentation, you can go straight to the Storybook or straight to the Figma. So it's kind of like the entry point, and then people can go wherever they want based on what kind of knowledge they're trying to gather.
Yeah, not to totally copy what he just said, but if you go on newskit.co.uk and you go on any one of the component pages, we do have buttons out to storybook scenarios, code as well, viewing GitHub. So yeah, we use Figma to create designs, but yeah, it's really important, obviously, for engineers to see in the documentation things like props and overrides, best practice. So we have like a mix between design and dev. But yeah, engineers sometimes just want to get to Storybook, and we make sure that we surface those all in like one place.
Excellent. Cool. I'm actually glad to see that quite a lot of designers are kind of getting into Storybook as well, so I think that's pretty awesome. Just staying a little bit, so just staying a little bit with accessibility before we move over to a little bit about more research. What's the level of accessibility that we should aim to as an open source contributor?
As I mentioned in my talk, like we at Mews, we're aiming for WCAG 2.1 AA. That's, as far as I'm aware, it's kind of like the legal requirement in a way. And then I think that covers you like enough in terms of, especially if you want to open source your design system, because it can be used for multiple scenarios in multiple industry that maybe can create some legal issues. And I think that's the one that you should use at the moment. I think the new version is coming out soon, but I don't think it's out yet. And even when it comes out, I think will be required after a bit. There's a bit of period of transition. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the standard. So we get like 2.1 AA.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to move over to, we're going to talk a little bit about research and maintaining cross-platform design systems. So this is for all of you. Have you got any ideas of keeping up with the day-to-day? We're going to start with the day-to-day feature work. So obviously most of you are probably familiar with this. You try to run a product or create a product, and at the same time, the team is also trying to create a design system, because many companies don't have a separate design system team. So what are thoughts on keeping up with the day-to-day feature work whilst trying to maintain a design system, especially if it's a cross-platform design system? Any of you can jump in. I know they're so eager to ask that question. Answer that question.
I can go first.
Go for it.
Well, at Mews, like we have a proper design system team, it's like 10 of us, but we obviously work for other developers in the team, so we tend to get requirements from them, and we try to kind of like each sprint that we work on to have like half, like we try to implement a new functionality that gets required from other teams, and at the same time we try to kind of like improving the components that we already have, and maybe like working on toolings or experiment on new stuff, and create like some MVP and stuff like that. So we try to like keep ourselves happy in the team while make the other people in the rest of the company also happy about using the components that we built for them.
Yeah, I'll go on next. So we do have different features, different products that we build with NewsKit. So we have our components, but we also have more themable, as you maybe would say, products like Checkout and Help Hub as well, which is like a FAQ sort of section. So yeah, the idea is we do have component requirements that come in, and we sort of try and see if there's the same sort of issues or the same sort of requirements from different teams, and then we sort of prioritize those components, and then we offer these more fully fledged end-to-end sort of products as well. So.
And Michelle, have you sort of have experience of trying to keep up with one thing whilst also doing the other thing?
That's the life of a developer, really. So I would say, again, it depends on the maturity of a design system. That's a real important factor. I mean, it's impossible to do a big bang kind of approach to here's our design system, implement it everywhere. So as long as you're doing it incrementally and you make these communicable changes and you make it in a way which everyone is on board with them, it makes life easy. And you don't have, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So obviously a business case changes, but for the most part, treat it as something that you want to have as a long-term goal. So do it here and there when you can, and don't try to rush it.
Okay, brilliant. So let's take that to one harder level. That was as if that wasn't hard enough. So somebody has got a great question. Any thoughts on suggestions for creating and maintaining a global design system across native mobile, iOS, Android, as well as web and big screen devices, TV? Now, this is someone that has a challenge ahead of them. I would say really push your company to try to get a separate design system team. That's probably a good way to try to really argue why that would help everybody. But yeah, so how do we sort of support, again, everyone everywhere at the same time?
I would say, yeah, focus on the broader sort of needs, obviously. That's probably a given. But in terms of like mobile, you know, we do have a couple of different products over on like Talk TV and, you know, different sorts of media brands, and they do have like more of a need for mobile, so that's something we want to try and expand into. I know we've done a little bit of digging here and there and trying to figure out how we support those, but yeah, as you say, having a dedicated design team that can, you know, see the bigger picture, and you can sort of tie that to other team needs as well. So say if you do want to support a set of iOS or Android specific components, then, you know, can that be used by as many teams as possible, and hopefully you can sort of gather all that together. So yeah, having one central team. Sorry to steal your thing.
Absolutely not. I mean, that clearly means that I said something right, so I appreciate it. Any thoughts from you, Riccardo?
Yeah, similar scenario. We actually have a web design system and a mobile one. The web is built in React and TypeScript, and the mobile one is built with Flutter, works for both Android and iOS, and we have actually a mobile developer as part of the design system team. So for us, it's working quite a lot because he's always involved with any kind of like discussion that he's making, and he works with designer. Even if then he goes and builds like components that are completely different for ours and they live like in a different storybook. The fact is like, it's not like we build a component and we give it to him and we say, oh, now you build the mobile version. Like we kind of like think together, and he will have like his own ticket and we have our own tickets for the web, but it's always since the beginning, and that means like if the components used are different, they look exactly the same and they act in the same way. And yeah, for us it's been quite good in terms of like having someone involved from kind of like a mobile developer as part of the team.
Great. Mitchell?
All right, I'm going to say something a bit controversial.
Hold on tight.
Hold on time. So I believe, you know, mobile, web, you know, TV, they should be their own experiences. You're focusing on the why, like why are you doing something? And so my experience is like if you're making a mobile application, a lot of times the feel should be similar, but you shouldn't try to make those components look exactly as they do on the web. You always end up with discrepancies. There is things like React Native Web, which allow you to do both React Native and web. As an example, obviously there's other technologies out there, but it always ends up that you're going to have these changes, these discrepancies, so focus on the experience more than trying to get those things aligned. Yeah.
I'm not sure that's super controversial, to be honest. I think it's a fair.
Yeah, I was expecting something more controversial.
Yeah, native only or something.
Well, yeah, exactly, like something really controversial. No, I think that makes total sense, and I agree. I think that sometimes we can be a bit too obsessed that it has to look identical across various devices, and some devices you don't do some things on, so you might want to ask yourself, is it needed that this is available on every single device? So yeah, no, all of us here I think agree, Mitchell, so not controversial. Well done.
Great.
Thank you. We are still looking forward to that really controversial point at some point during this evening. It's going to come from someone, I'm sure. So quick question here. So design people and dev team. Oh, I love that. Just that forming is fantastic. Maybe this is the controversial question we were looking for. Design people and dev teams speak different languages. Any advice about this? Yes, I feel like you were immediately.
Well, as I mentioned, we have about 5, me being 1 designer in our team, and we've got more engineers. So we have shared daily stand-ups. So we share a Kanban board. Our tickets match the overall sprint. We join tech analysis as well, and like grooming sessions. So we go through the tickets. So we have more of a deeper sort of understanding of what's going on. Obviously, we're not engineers, but it's more of trying, as I mentioned before, trying to sort of bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah, I think we do the same, and at the beginning, having kind of designers join the planning session, they were like, oh, while we're here, you're just estimating your tickets for developers, but having them there is kind of start this conversation that you can have, because at the end, you're building UI components, so there's a design elements in there, and the fact that the designer is there while you're estimating, then okay, you're here, so what do you think about this? How do you think is this ready? How long sometimes I think the communication it's broken because you receive a piece of design and you're supposed to implement it, and then something is missing, something is clear, so you go back to the designers, can you explain to me? And then the estimation goes off, and it's all this at the end when you do a retro, people complain, it's oh, this took longer than expected. So I think treat everyone equally, in the sense everyone can actually have an input and help each other out. I think it's quite important. And maybe in some meetings you're not as useful than in other meetings, but the fact you participate, first, that means you're part of the team, and I think it's more inclusivity. And second, you kind of make collaboration as a kind of a de facto way of working together.
Yeah. I mean, this is basically what your talk was about, Mitchell. So,
yes.
If for those of you who are still asking, do rewatch Mitchell's presentation. Actually, I would like to add something else on top of that, and I think that, first of all, I don't think that we should be afraid of, as you're saying, having joint stand-up, I think, is super important, because as soon as you not have that, you're starting a division already, and once that division starts, then it's very difficult to all of a sudden go yeah, but we all have to come together. So that, I think, is great. I think there's also stuff outside the work. So in some projects where we try to do a coffee morning on a Monday, where we actually get the team together and we don't talk work, and what people realize is that, oh, it turns out designers are just normal people, and so are engineers, and they actually can communicate with each other. So that's actually helped us on a couple of projects to just sort of, let's talk less design and engineering, and let's just talk about what people did on the weekend, or what they're planning on doing this week, or what the project is looking like in general. And having those, I guess those project events as well, they're not just the stand-up, but actually the planning, the retro, making sure that everyone actually participates in that. So it is a sense of we are one team, and we all have the same goal. And sometimes we don't always understand what the other person is talking about, and you know what, that's actually okay. And one other thing I would say as well is encourage people to attend things like conferences or meetups. I mean, maybe there is a meetup near you that you should encourage everyone to attend to, I'm not sure. Or even things like internal learning and brown bags and stuff like that, and actually make sure that even if you don't understand what that person is talking about, you get an understanding of what it's in the vicinity of their work. And I actually think that can really, really help that communication. So yeah, we tried that, and that has been quite successful. So that's my contribution. Still nothing controversial. So I don't know why. I feel like I'm now obsessed looking for the controversial. I'm going to stop doing that. So for the testing, are there any tips you can provide on the format of questions that you guys, how you formulate questions to yield more honest results? I'm not going to say better, more honest results.
Yeah, so normally tend to give a bit of an example to start with, saying examples in the past have included things like documentation or support or components, something really specific or something quite general. And I think it's more, I was talking to someone the other day in the team, and we were saying survey results can tend to be quite forgiving, weirdly. Whereas in person, if you try and disarm it a little bit and say, this isn't going to come back on you, this is just so we can improve, you tend to get more honest feedback. So that doesn't mean it's going to be bad, but it means that it's generally more honest and useful. That's what we're looking for. So.
Yeah. Any from your experience of how to make sure that we get sort of the most honest result or answers as possible?
Yeah, I think like back to what I was saying, like we organized these office hours, and initially people, they were like, oh, like why I'm joining this, there's like nothing specifically I want to talk about. But then we started to actually kind of like go around the company and just like, oh, you're just new designer, just join, like come to the office hours. And actually, because they're not, maybe they're new, they tend to ask like more honest question, and then you get something more honest from them. People just like, oh, I seen this design for the first time, I don't think it works that well, you know. And then I think if you're just like a newbie, then you feel like more, you know, say, oh, I don't know more about this. If you've been in a company for ages, just accept that something is like that, and you never like question like the status quo anymore. So like trying to be proactive and try to have as many people as possible with kind of like coming from different background and also a different seniority in the company, different experience, to come and share with us like their opinion about whatever, even if they like, sometimes we're like, you know, product manager coming to the meeting, like they never like, you know, use the design or the code, but they just like see the product build with our components and they say, oh, you know, why there's something like this or something like that. So I think that's a good way to kind of like, you know, sense the pulse of like I guess the customers and the user of the components and the design system.
Yeah. Any comments from you?
I'll add one comment. Your first line of defense of a design is your developer. He'll be the first person to try it out and actually look at it. So really take on board what they say, because a lot of times they won't sugarcoat it.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes we need that as designers, so it's good. When you, sorry, I had a question here. So it was such a good question. Now I lost it. Okay, here we go. So you guys talk about scoring when you do your testing. Mm-hmm. So what's the kind of lowest score before the team jumps into action regarding that satisfaction tracking?
So to do with the related to the NPS score.
I would imagine that's because it's related to what you were talking about.
Yeah, so we use that to keep an eye on any attractors, detractors, and we can sort of like break it down and see generally like which sort of teams or job titles, that sort of thing, sort of job roles people have. So if it dips below a certain point, there isn't like a bell, I don't know anyway, that goes off and said, look at this, but we do keep an eye on it. It's not like a thing that we're checking like once a month. You know, we're actively sort of checking it. Like more of our product people are doing that and keeping an eye on that. And yeah. Okay,
so building on that, we still hanging around the feedback. So we talked about yielding their honest answers. We talked about low scoring. So what's the setup or framework for dealing with difficult feedback? And this is not just for you, this is actually for all of you. Dealing with difficult feedback from users, and I'm going to assume here that we're talking designers and engineers, we're talking design systems, or feedback that you didn't necessarily agree with. How do you deal with that?
So if it's in the form of a survey, it's maybe a little bit easier because it's a bit far removed, and you can maybe look at it in a bit more of an objective sort of view. If it's in something like a consumer interview or you're just having a chat with someone, I think it's try and take your own opinion out of it. I try to, you know, I obviously know bits and pieces here and there, definitely not on the engineering side of things, but just try and listen to what they say, take that note, and then maybe I don't think it's an important thing, or maybe I don't agree, but there are many other people in my team anyway that are knowledgeable in different areas, so maybe they do. So it's worth just sharing it.
Absolutely.
I would say like, well, first like any like feedback I think is good feedback. Obviously, if it comes with, you know, respecting each other. For us, what we realize, like when people, you know, in Slack or during our office hours, or even like people, they open a ticket, like we have a Jira board, and actually people can assign ticket to our design system team. Usually, even if we receive like a quite harsh feedback, it's like, oh, this doesn't work, this is broken, or this doesn't do what we should do, it's because there was a problem with the documentation. Like the component probably was offering the kind of like requirements that were required, but for some reason, was our fault to not express those kind of like requirements and the possibility of this component from both a design and kind of like development point of view. And we some people, you have to try to put yourself in the shoes of like someone who's trying to, implement some components and then they don't work, they get frustrated. It's like, oh, and then, I don't know, project manager goes to them and is like, oh, why is it taking you so long to build this page? It's like, oh, this component doesn't do what I want to do. Like, usually it's because there's something in documentation that is missing. And then like, try to get like, the feedback in the most positive way as possible and implement the documentation and just like, again, build a better relationship with the other people in your company.
Yeah.
Well, this one's quite a good question, actually.
No, it's okay.
So from an engineer, developer point of view, I think a lot of engineers maybe don't quite attach themselves to the design. So when the designer's giving them, they'll give the feedback very honestly, and it might be a bit abrasive. So if you're an engineer, maybe think about the emotions and the fact that people probably have put in a lot of work to make that design work. There have been cases where I've had to implement something that I very much disagreed with. And it was very hard, actually, to work on something because you end up a bit disheartened with the product you're building because there's a lot of heart in there as you build something. And it's important to, what they've said is to take it on board and take on board that maybe other people have other opinions, other decisions. I think engineers find it a bit hard to disengage from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably something that both designers and engineers share. You do tend to get attached to work sometimes, and I think it's in the same way that you're looking at, is this not my opinion? So make sure you step away. It's actually also learning how to not get too attached to your work. As in, yeah, of course, you should be enjoying what you're doing. You should be proud of it. But it isn't your actual baby. And if he has to go out with the dishwater, he has to go out with the dishwater. That's just the way it is sometimes. And that's a tough lesson to learn. So we have another question around this. And if you feel like you've already answered this in the previous one, I will accept that, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So how do we test, I wonder, how do you test the user friction and how that input gets materialized? I guess it is a little bit different, but tough one.
Yeah.
Might have to come back to it.
I might say, like, I think what I just said before, like, the fact that, like, in our case, anyone can just open a bug and just assign to us, then when we check our bugs, like as frequently as we can, and when we realize that actually, multiple people from different teams that end up opening the same bug about the same issues, then we realize, okay, that's something, it's not like a one-off, because sometimes we get a bug and we say, no, this is not a bug, there was a decision that was made, and this might create some friction for you, but the component was designed and developed in a certain way, and the documentation should explain to you the reason why. But sometimes when we see like multiple people complaining about the same things and saying, oh, this is very difficult to use, then obviously the friction materializes in a way that's like, okay, like this is creating a problem, not just for like an individual person in the company, but for like multiple teams, and that you have to act in a way, and maybe we invite them to explain, in a meeting why they find it difficult, because, sometimes opening a bug and a ticket can be very difficult to understand what they mean. Maybe they put a screenshot or like a video and just like, okay, but what actually the real issue here? And maybe you can find, an agreement. You have a conversation and you agree in the middle ground. I will change something, and then you implement like in this different way.
Great. Okay. So I'm gonna jump in here with a really random question. So this is what happens every time we get someone who asks something really random. So I'm assuming this is a question to you, Mike, and you do not have to answer it. But have you taken the background image from the Matrix movie?
Oh.
I told you it was random.
I'm not sure which one.
Oh, so there you go. Whoever asked that question, I hope you're happy that we did spend time to get that answered. So, how do we rationalize? We're back on documentation again. Oh, I love this. How do you rationalize the balance between short, concise documentation and the need to cover edge cases? Mitchell, I'm going to pass this to you first, because you were talking about edge cases in your presentation, and give these guys a bit of an extra moment to think.
Oh, that is quite a good question. I would say, it's not necessary to cover those in your style guide. That's not what it's for. Cover them in your foundational components. So, for example, when I mentioned there about, a button, or if you have too much text, what happens, that's where you want to comment and say, this button's for an overflow. so I don't think it needs documentation.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have our storybook, so we do have different scenarios, our components that we tend to offer. I'm sure it's not unique to our design system. Try to gather like best practice for the different teams and stuff that are using it. But yeah, we do have some examples in storybook to cover some of those edge cases. I mean, it's kind of hard unless you have a relationship with those different teams, so you can sort of hear if there's any particular issues that they have, and then maybe you can look to address it generally. But yeah, we try to put different versions, different behaviors, different variants, and list those on Storybook.
Yeah.
I will add, there's something like I've seen in a lot of documentation for the design system to have like the do column and the don't column. They actually explain how a component should be used and why not, in what case. And I think that having this kind of like two columns with different scenarios can actually help users to understand why the component is done in a certain way, how it should be consumed, and how it should be implemented, and then can bring down the amount of questions that someone might have. Is like, oh, because you explain the edge cases, you explain the different things, and that can be quite helpful. Another thing I would say maybe it's to have different documentation for different targets in a way. You can have your design tab and your developer tab, and maybe they do different type of users. They want to know about different things. So you can kind of target documentation more for the right people at in the right space on the page.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I agree, and I also think that everything doesn't actually have to go in the design system or the style guide sometimes. Sometimes we're in situations, I think you touched on this, Mitchell, if it is an edge case, does it have to be in there? I mean, yeah, it should be represented somewhere, but it could be an explanation rather than it has to be part of the design system or the complete style guide. Jumping back and forth, because this is how we love it. So I guess this is very much a question for engineers. Do you ever use any whiteboarding apps to communicate with designers, or do we find you on a fig jam board or a mirror board or any kind of whiteboarding sessions?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, very helpful. Figma has a commenting functionality. It's really nice. You both jump on it. You can talk, and basically you can quickly pinpoint the different things and leaving comments. That's very, very useful. In terms of whiteboarding, if you're in person, obviously that really helps. But in general, a lot of people are working remote first. So yeah, something like Figma where you can actually comment as you go.
Yeah, Figma for sure for kind of collaboration between designer and developers. And if you then, once you move, from the design phase, so you're actually into the development phase and you're starting to build a component, what we find very useful in my team is all the engineers like to kind of sit together remotely, because we're remote, maybe do a VS Code collaboration and just build the component without the design first, just get all the properties out, get all the functionalities, build something that doesn't look at all what it should look, but at least you have the kind of the development needs and requirements in place, and they all agreed between the different developers. So then it means also when one of the person in the team end up actually building the final component and the other people are reviewing the code, they actually are aware of how the code should look like, what kind of options should have, when you click a button, what should happen, how many variants, all this kind of stuff. So make a decision altogether instead of just sending a developer to his own journey to actually build a component from scratch.
Great, awesome. So, sorry, we have a lot of questions and I'm looking at the time, and I think we should try to squeeze in a few more because there's some really good questions in here. So, what are your thoughts, since we're talking about, I guess, whiteboarding? So, it's kind of a link here. I'm going to make this a link. So, what are your thoughts on free-form design versus the structure that comes with design systems? If there is too much structure, do we lose creativity? So the reason why I think this is a super interesting question, because this is something that comes up often. Are design systems stopping us from being creative? I have an opinion on that, but I'll let these guys answer first. So how are you feeling? Free-form design versus the structure?
I don't think it has to be at all, especially if you have a robust library in something like Figma, to build out stuff, as long as things can be themed. We use different Figma tokens plugin. We're starting to sort of use that so that it can be easier for designers to use the same components and break them apart. There's also local design systems as well, so they can take individual pieces like buttons and what have you and combine them into their own component.
Yeah.
I think I will add also I think a design system is not like like something that you have to respect and admire, never trying to change or like improve. Like contribution is quite a massive part of design system. Like if you as a designer, you feel too constrained about the option that you have, maybe you can, present like a different theme or a different way of how a component is designed, do some research, like present the case, and, in a good like situation where the design system team is mature enough, like obviously the input from people from outside the team are usually like the best input, because obviously you spend day in and out inside your components and they kind of like see the other side, so they can actually help you quite a lot. So if you're frustrated, like, maybe it means that you can improve it.
So my point of view is, make it very structured. And when you need to make it custom, open it up, allow that change. Because what you don't want happening is everything's custom, and then your whole experience is a mess. It just makes life easier.
So I would actually say that I think it kind of depends on, if you're looking at the design system as a starting point of a concept, then in my opinion, I think you're potentially taking not the best approach. Because if you started with a design system as the way to guide you for your concept, then yes, you can be limited. But actually, design system is there to support what you have already created. It's not necessarily, okay, we need to make a new product, let's do a design system and then create a product. You are making designs, and as a designer, you should feel free to be as creative as you possibly can. Then the design system is a tool to help you. How do we now take this design and make it something that communicates well what needs to be done, and allow a team to understand how to build it and how can we replicate it. So when people, for me, it's always like, well, that's because you think that design system is the starting point, and in my opinion, it isn't. Be creative, have a concept, and then see how design system can support that concept rather than the other way around. And that way, I think that you can feel less inhibited by your creativity, or by the design system to kind of stop your creativity. So we are over on UX manager perspective. So I'm not sure, I might have missed, is anyone here as UX manager? Okay, so let's just say from a UX perspective, I'm going to cut the manager out. Okay. Are we aware, or are you aware about the technical processes user interaction can imply? This is a developer asking. I'm not 100% sure I fully understand this question, but we have had a few thumbs up on it, so we're going to go for it.
Can you repeat? Sorry.
I can indeed. I think it needs to be repeated. From a UX perspective, are either of you aware about the technical processes user interactions can imply? I ask as a developer. I feel like I'm being trolled, but...
I'm really trying to follow.
Yeah, me too. Do you know what? Let's put that in the maybe later pile and move on to another one, shall we?
Okay.
Or unless we have that person here and they feel brave enough to give us a further explanation.
I want to try and answer. But
you want to?
But I can't. I can't quite understand.
No, I don't.
The intention's there. The
100% intention. Hence why I'm reading it out. But you know what? Let's talk about how we can involve other people in the design process. So, why not involve people with a range of disabilities in the design process? Is that a much more powerful way to develop empathy and sort of respond to accessibility? Have you guys given this any thought?
I think, and I'm talking like as not like, because in like, my team we have like people with like disability or impediment or this kind of stuff, but like you should try to have the team and the people in your company as diverse as possible, and that will help you to first like to have people to actually can help you to understand what you should fix and what you should implement in the first place, but also like to increase the empathy, because it's easier to feel empathy for someone that you see and you know, and can be more difficult to feel empathy for someone like it's far from you in terms of like situation or whatever situation like might be there. So like, you know, bring diversity in your team, and that will increase the empathy, and as a consequence will increase for sure the accessibility of whatever you're building or designing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also when you test, you should also ensure that you test with various different demographics and people of various different abilities. So you're actually not testing it with the same type of people all the time, because then you're just going to get.
And you know, like on that, like what I was saying in my talk, like design system is for the final users of your product, but also like for the people in your company that actually use your components. Like, you know, if you're building something that's not accessible, they cannot do their job. Like you actually making the life of your colleague like difficult, and obviously this should not happen.
From your perspectives, again, I keep on referring to slightly sort of fairly mature design system by now. How do you involve people of various abilities?
So we do each sort of component that we, for example, that we add to the system. We have a accessibility spike where, you know, a member of our team goes away, finds general best practice from WCAG, what have you, and then, you know, broadly speaking, it's generally used for best practice, but then I guess it's more of like the application of it within the actual product themselves. So, you know, if you mentioned before, if there was like a particular issue or something like that, making sure that, again, by speaking to people, you're aware of it. You know, it's more, just being sort of responsive to that, listening to it. And obviously, if it's an accessibility problem, it's a big problem, and not just because, you know, you want to try and fix it, but it should be, everything should be universal for everyone. You know, you're going to lose money if that's what you're concerned with down the line anyway. So everything should be made for everyone in mind.
Makes sense, absolutely. So I'm going to get 2 more questions, and then I have a bonus question, and I'm looking forward to the bonus question because this is a good one, trust me. So we talked about the research, we talked about identifying things, and so now we gather this and we're now going to make the changes. What is a good way, or what do you consider is the best way to communicate the updates on design system components, and how to make sure that the changes are actually in fact released and not just sort of they're there, but they actually get implemented? So
we provide, royal we, I suppose, with engineers, write detailed release notes where it's anything to do with a new product, new products or new component, new feature updates, any breaking changes as well. So we follow like major releases as well. We try to sort of communicate that clearly as much as possible. We share it over Slack as well. And we have a regular showcase meeting as well, where we sort of present back anything new that's coming to the system. So hopefully people can start to see, you know, those sort of more, like any breaking changes or anything like that, they can be aware of them. Excellent.
Yes, similar. We actually have a Slack channel just for like the design system team, like release notes. So at the end of every sprint, we summarize whatever we release in terms of like design and code, documentation also, but also like what we have in progress. Just because we have a lot of other teams in the company, they have kind of like requests for customers, and they say, oh, you know, when this is coming out, when this is coming out. So we keep them updated also like in terms of work in progress. So actually they can say to the customer, oh, you know, a team in the company is working on it. So, and at the same time, we release like the knowledge about something get released goes internally first, so then they can prepare the release note for the final customers, and actually, you know, they can announce something is, you know, we're changing all the icons, I guess you don't want to surprise them. So we do that in advance internally, so then various project managers in the various team can actually then create their own external release notes in order for, you know, their final customers to be, you know, happy with that and be ready that something is coming.
Excellent, thank you. And how has the updates been communicated?
So as I touched on my talk, have those change logs very detailed, have that Slack channel which is only for those updates, communicate when a change is very breaking, communicate that across the board and make it very obvious, and like to the point where you're not even communicating on the normal Slack channel, you're actually communicating it in the main channel for everyone to know. Those kind of things really help. Yeah, just as I said in my talk, just package them up quite nicely.
So speaking of your talk, actually, so this is the last question. Now maybe we have reached that controversial point, so get your popcorns out, people. So this is me reading the question, so this is not me stating this is the truth. Okay. So in your talk, the impression was that designers should be careful when communicating or not communicating. Can you please explain? Is this a conflicting as we should all communicate with each other? Maybe there is a clarification rather than explanation here.
Can you repeat the question?
So I think at some point in your talk you were talking about communication, and I think you mentioned something that designers should not communicate. Can we elaborate a little bit on this? Can we see maybe there was a misunderstanding here that we can just have a clarification?
No, I don't think there was a miscommunication there. I think also, yeah.
Told you, this is what we've been waiting for.
So obviously there's a balance of communication. If your style guide is very communicates well intent purposes, you communicate less. So you want to be able to have a design where a developer looks at it and they're like, I understand it, I can go and do it. And so that's the time when you don't need to put comments because it's obvious. And it's only when it's like very custom or very like goes against the grain that you'll communicate.
So basically aim to make sure that your documentation is communicating for you rather than you having to explain what you were trying to do. Okay, great. So I'm glad it wasn't as controversial. I think we sorted that one out. So this is the last question for the evening. And can I just say that this question has got the most thumbs up of all of the questions. There's a whole bunch of questions that we unfortunately didn't have time to go through, so I apologize for that. But a lot of those questions are in regards to communication, the fact that engineers are super busy. Is that not the case for designers? Yes, designers are also very busy. Everyone's very busy. But this is my favorite question I think we ever had. Who would win in a fight between designers and developers? And do you know what? This is something that we are not going to find out because there shall be no fighting. So I think that's a great question. Is it a great question to wrap up on? Well, I'm making a great question to wrap up on. So without having to prove who would win that, yes, the front row is ready already. He's already got his sleeves up, ready to go. I want to thank all the three of you so much for taking the time to put together fantastic presentations and for coming here, giving them to us, and answering everyone's questions. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are allowed to come on stage. This is gonna, okay, I'm gonna talk in here now. Okay, so we are, let's see if I'm hooked up. Yes, I am. So we had this already, quickly running through everything again. Okay, so here we are. Before we go, first of all, as I said, thank you so much to these guys for doing their presentations and for taking the time. Obviously, we also need to thank our sponsors, YLD, for always supporting this. And this amazing venue sponsor, News UK, for having us here. I mean, come on, how delightful has this been? And for all of you online, it has been great. And anyone that's online and thinks, oh my God, I missed out. Don't worry, DSL will be back, and maybe you can come next time. And if you can't, we will always keep on supporting the live stream as well. We already have our next DSL planned and ready for launch, so we're going to see a little bit of a preview on that for a second. I also want to take the opportunity to promote our sister community, React.js Girls, who will be back in person with in-person events too. And if you're thinking, oh my God, do you know what I love on a Wednesday night? Is to go to a community event. And I really wish there was one I could go to on a Thursday night. Do not fret, there is. React.js Girl is on tomorrow. And for those of you who can't make it in person, we are also live streaming that one, of course. And then obviously remember that YLD and other companies we heard of today are always looking for interesting talents, new projects. So obviously I have to just say, like, back that question, who should I get a job with? So as I said, we are going to be back. Design System London number 7. 7, yeah, that's it. non-profit meetup for the design system community. Been banging on about it all night. Wild is again supporting us, and next time we are visiting the lovely people at justeattakeaway.com. And for all of you who are in this room living in London, you are probably very familiar with that company, and we are super excited about visiting their space. We already have a fantastic lineup for that, so keep an eye on all the socials. They should be launched very shortly. But before that, React.js Girl number 23, yeah? 23 of them. So meet up for every developer where women take the stage. So this, I just want to make something very clear here. React.js Girls is for girls and boys and anyone else. Everyone is welcome. But women do take the center stage, as in we have a full female cast presenting some fantastic talk on React. Do take a quick look on the socials as well, and you will see all about it. And for those of you who think, is there a way for me to find out what they have talked about in the past? You know, there is. It's that QR code again. Yeah, I know. She's like, Jesus, is he ever going to stop talking about that bloody QR code? Do you know what? I'm not. I'm very proud of it. So, without further ado, I stole this very frankly, without any permission. Obviously, we love to get feedback. So as this, you may have seen this in a slide from a previous presentation. Sorry about that. But why not reuse it? It was very good. So please give us your feedback. There is a form that will be sent out to everybody on the meetup and Eventbrite. No permission whatsoever. Proud of it. Thank you so much to everyone in this room as well for joining us, and thank you to everybody on the live stream as well for joining us. And for those of you who think, do you know what, I feel like I want to chat more to people, you can. I'm not sure how much time we have in this space, but there are some drinks left, and then we will get ushered out. And when we do get ushered out, let's meet at the Sheaf for some post-event drinks. That's it for... Oh, hang on. Do you know what? I am about to make a complete fool of myself. So I'm glad I have a team here to support me. Because apparently we do have one more thing that I've forgotten. And do you know what? You're going to laugh at me because I've been looking forward to this moment all evening. So we are going to have an Oprah moment. Everyone's like, what does that mean? For those of you who don't know what it is, we have some, I want to say, fantastically exciting goodie bags to give out. So if you take a seat, take a look under your seat. Oh yeah, don't be shy. Unfortunately for the people on the live review, there's no point looking under your seats. We haven't been to your house. So take a look under your seat, all of you. I encourage you to just stand up, take a look under your seat, and if you find something, come back to me. I would highly encourage, there's some people I know not doing it. No? Nothing? Oh my God, if you saw this on the live stream, you'll love it. People are going crazy. Chairs are flying, clothes have, no, nothing of that. Okay, I see somebody found something. I can see it. Okay, fabulous. We have one winner. Brilliant. There is two, so someone else has not looked properly or haven't bothered looking. Oh, now someone else is kind of like, come on, hang on, there is still a chance for me. Go on, yeah. I'm not looking at people in particular, but there's a row here that should make more effort. There is somebody particular in that row that making zero effort who really should. There we go. There. Ah, there we go. We have a second winner as well. So, let me see. Okay, they're gone. I don't know where they're gone. Yes. So if you go over there and see our lovely team, they will give you a goodie bag. You are the winner of the evening. Congratulations. Unfortunately, that's where the Oprah moment stops. There are no cars for everybody. We can't afford that. Now it's time to finally say thank you to everybody and wrap up. And we'll see you all at Design System 7 at eattakeaway.com. Justin.